So welcome to today's Inspiration Trust Art CPD. We are really grateful to have Kate Farley, who is the course leader of Textile Design. Am I right there, Kate?
Yeah, I run both the BA Textile Design as well as the BA in Fashion.
Fantastic, thank you. So just a reminder, we are recording today, and thank you to everyone who has arrived. I'm going to hand it over to Kate, who is going to deliver your presentation for approx 20 minutes. But of course, there are any questions and answers that you have. If I can ask you just to mute your microphones and then to use the raise hand button. And Kate, I will endeavour to help and support you with those people that have got any questions. Okay, thank you, Kate.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm praying that I have decent Wi-Fi to get through this. I've told my family to get off the Wi-Fi. So can you see the screen? Can you see my presentation there, Heather?
Yep, I can see your presentation. Can everybody else thumbs up? Yeah, I think we've got thumbs up and nods going on. That's great, Kate.
Excellent, fantastic. So so I'm an academic and I run the two different degree courses here at NUA. I am Norfolk born and bred. I've been away to London and Birmingham for many years and came back a couple of years ago to settle back into Norfolk. And it's lovely to be here now. I'm going to talk through what is textile design in relation to how we approach the subject within NUA, and particularly with employability and industry relevance. So I hope that that's useful to you. When I was asked to do this presentation, I thought, well, it'd be really useful to get a bit of feedback from our current students. So I put out on our digital chat to each of the 3 years, what is textile design? And it was an interesting exercise because some of them told us what our course was, and I was wanting a slightly broader response to that. But I've highlighted some terms here. I seem to have spent 20 years of my career trying to explain to people what textile design is, but also to try and explain to them that, or almost defend what textile design is, in the sense that it isn't a niche subject. If you think about where textiles is, we're all sat wearing textiles, we all sleep around textiles, our interiors are filled with the stuff. We've obviously got textiles in healthcare and so much more, and I'll go on to explain that. So I think it's really interesting to ask the students what they think it is, and what's really exciting is that these comments here actually demonstrate how much they are more excited about what it was, or what it is, what they've discovered it is, having been on our course, rather than when they came onto it. I'm fascinated by the student who said, I naively thought that textiles was basically just sewing, and yet still chose to do the subject. So there's an interesting comment. She's now 3rd year and thriving and doing fantastically well. But I do think that we have this issue where textile design comes across as almost an apology for itself, as if it is a risk subject. And at open days, I would often have parents sort of saying, well, but is there a career in this? And I'm trying to explain it's one of the biggest global industries, and there's very, very many specific skills and jobs, as well as obviously lots of transferable. So, and I sometimes feel that textile design is seen as a secondary subject of fashion. Now, I'm a textile designer, I run both courses, I have to obviously share my loyalties, but sometimes textiles feels like it's a bit of a pocket on the side of fashion. And I would say, well, in that sense, fashion needs fabric slightly more than textiles needs fashion, because textiles could be also for interiors and any other application. So that I'm being argumentative and playing devil's advocate, but I think we need to start thinking that textiles is not a small subject that is a domestic activity, but a major global industry, and with much excitement. So that's a sort of an opening gambit really to be thinking about. I'm going to talk through, I've got 3 slides just to show you a little bit about my work, my design practice. I studied a degree in textile design and surface pattern. I then went on and did an MA in book art because I was really interested in narrative and drawing and book forms and sort of sculptural book pieces as well. Oh gosh, sorry, it's clicking. I've always been interested in drawing. I've always been interested in pattern design. And I've always been part-time academic and part-time designer until NUA, and now I'm full-time academic, but still run my business somehow in the early hours of the morning. So I've got a column down the left-hand side that demonstrates over the last sort of 20-odd years of 25 years of practice, the different sort of roles and sort of relationships that I've had in the industry. And these are 2 of the collections that I've launched. I've launched 3 over the last decade. And I've worked with manufacturers to outsource production. I've made some of my products myself. I'm really interested in traditional pattern structures. So, for example, the bag with the carrots coming out the top on the bottom left there is a dog tooth, it's a houndstooth check pattern. And yet I've put cutlery in it and garden tools, and it's kind of this narrative of growing your own vegetables. So it's got cooking and gardening tools as well as cutlery. And I really enjoyed learning things. I might fail at something, but I've probably learned something as a result of that. So, working out how to work with retailers and wholesale orders and things like that, as well as carrying out commissions. I'm also really interested in collaborations. So I worked with Formica to launch some of my designs on laminate, because I'm interested in hard and soft materials as well. So sometimes they are small scale products for retail. Sometimes I've done much bigger schemes, which I'll show you. So working with fabric and sort of more traditional textile design, I carry out commissions for organisations to generate bespoke patterns that represent their brand. So you can see the Barbican design. I was asked to produce a pattern that celebrated architecture and music of the Barbican. And so I've used sort of visual qualities of the architecture and sort of the building styles and sort of placed negative and positive forms. And that's demonstrating the sort of role that Barbican plays in terms of the music, and celebrates the architecture of the campus. David Mellor, I've worked with them to celebrate their cutlery. I realised that they didn't have any pattern design within their catalogue, but they make the most beautiful cutlery. And so I said, you're missing a trick. You need some graphic print in there. So for the last, coming up to a decade, about 8 years, I've been selling my tea towels to David Mellor. I've sent them across the world. I sell direct as well as through David Mellor. And it's a really nice relationship. And I outsource production to a British manufacturer. And the pattern belongs to me, but sells there and celebrates the British cutlery. And the tea towel from David Mellor actually got me the commission in Japan, which you can see top right. And the creative director saw the tea towels I produced and asked his assistant to track me down in Britain and commission me. And we worked together to produce a fashion collection with a hand-drawn repeated pattern, and it's called Scribble, and it's sort of a hand-drawn screen print on a few garments. And I've always carried out freelance work. So I've taken a portfolio around to different companies. I've worked via an agent as well, and I've sold to lots of different people, including Bowden, which is a page of my sketchbook that you can see there. Apologies, I seem to have got a transition set in these 3 slides, hence I'm having to sort of flash back. We won't have trouble after this slide. So they were kind of textile design examples. They're sort of probably not a big surprise to you in the sense of their pattern, and they're printed and they're on cloth. But one of the things that I've really enjoyed in my career that has sort of come from my textile design background is this interest in pattern elsewhere, so in the built environment and as illustration. So these projects, I've designed 4 posters for London Underground, which I have to say is a bit of a career highlight, because if you think about what's in that archive, it's phenomenal designers in there. And I had my posters on the Underground, and an incredibly proud moment. And I loved having a very tight commission, had to work as a poster, never designed a poster before, having to think about kind of the fact that you glance it for a second, which is really different to glancing, going through to an airport terminal sort of toilet and waiting area. So that was the design bottom left. And the design had to feature sort of Birmingham buildings, landmarks that were identifiable for people sort of passing through. I seem to have done toilets a number of times. In Colchester, which is top right, I designed a scheme in collaboration with a couple of other artists, some laminate designs that were celebrating Colchester's history. And a hospital roof in gravel, which is an interesting one. So again, it's a surface pattern challenge, it's a design challenge. I'm thinking about an audience, I'm thinking about heritage and site and material, and that was put down in gravel. And then I designed a book for Design for Today. So these projects are trying to give you an idea of the scope that, as somebody trained as a printed textile designer, how broad those skills can take you. And I think what's really important for me, balancing a design career with an academic one, is how important going out there and doing and learning and failing and succeeding and evolving my design career alongside my teaching career means that my teaching is incredibly relevant, and the students have that sense of kind of validity and it makes a really important relationship in terms of my own teaching. And obviously I build relationships with industry links for projects and talks and things like that, which is really useful. So I hope that gives you a bit of a sense of what I'm about. In terms of leading the textile design course, it's a really exciting challenge, because textile design, as I say, comes sometimes sort of as a bit of a kind of a shy character, and I think textile design needs to be shouted about far more. And so to lead this particular course and to shape it for the next sort of, moving into the future, sort of the next digital sort of progression, the next sort of social challenge. We've obviously got things like sustainability and well-being and inclusivity, and all of those subjects, these really big sort of global concerns, come back through textile design and how we relate to materiality. So I'm not going to read through all of the text I've got on the slides, but I hope that the bullet points there just give you a sense of some of the approaches we take within our design briefs. And so the students respond to very different briefs. They might be designing for a client with an architecture interiors direction. They might be designing sort of a trend project in relation to fashion knitwear, for example. And we build in through the course sort of all these different building blocks about how to relate to industry, whether they are entrepreneurs, whether they are whether they want to be a designer maker, a brand owner, whether they want to be part of the manufacturing industry, for example, sort of element. But we really sort of embrace solutions. It's about trying to see where textile design can be, and not necessarily as textiles, but how the skills and understanding that textile design brings can go to a sort of a wider opportunity for our graduates. So I think research, practice and process is really, really important, and that's inbuilt with all of our different projects. Even if they're essays, we still think about research and practice and what it means, what academic research might mean to the student who's taking that on as part of their design practice. And so we constantly evolve this idea of context, design and make, and you could reorder that in many different ways, because these, it's cyclical, the design process. Most of the images I've used in the presentation are of student work. Where it isn't student work, I've tried to label it so you've got a sense of whether it's kind of an industry piece. So I just want to talk a little bit about make, because actually when you ask students what textile design is, they will very often list a whole list of sort of practical skills that they have. So yes, they can know Photoshop, yes, they can knit, yes, they can weave. On our course, we don't ask our students to specialise at all. Some degree courses ask the students to experiment with all of them in, for example, the first term, and then choose one discipline, such as print or weave. But for us, we teach the sort of the basics of all of those disciplines throughout the first year, and then as they go through the second and third year, they can decide what process to use depending on the project and their own sort of skill set and career ambitions. And I think a lot of students really embrace that. Some want to be to some degree sort of knowing all of it, and some people want to be absolute specialists. But I think the fact that you've got an understanding, you might well be a weaver, but you know how a knitter might design, or you're a printer but you understand how your cloth has been created to hold your pattern, is really, really important. And if you're going on to be something like a buyer, you have an understanding and empathy of cloth to speak the language when you go to, say, factories or suppliers for price points and things like that. So the make is really important. One of my challenges really is to help our graduates to see more than just the make, that they're building skills across so many other things, which I'll come on to. But the make is at the heart of it, and that's a real challenge at this particular time because we are not in our studios. But normally the workshops are our real creative hubs. They're sort of home from homes, and it's where all the students mix across the different years usually. So it's a really sort of special environment. But it's really important that they see the making process as very much interlinked with the design process, because one feeds the other. You learn, reflect, analyse and go back through that process again. So we have traditional facilities for printing, for weaving, for knitting and stitching, and we also then have the digital kind of relative of that. So we have multi-head digital sewing machines, for example, for CAD software. We've got industry standard knit machines at Dubiers, as well as the domestics. And we have various levels of computerized looms. And we also have digital printers and transfer presses and sublamatic printing, as well as the traditional screen and dye lab. So we sort of cover all of those things, and as I say, they can sort of pick and mix, and we've got a wonderful team of technicians. But I think what's really important is that they see that, as I say, the design process is absolutely the thing that guides them. And I would say this is one of the things that helps students understand whether they fit both within fine art or design, or a bit of both, because I think sometimes I'm told by students, oh, well, I was told because I could draw, I should do fine art. And I would just make a small plea to anyone who hears that from a student to really think, you know, we want the flowers on our fabrics to be drawn the most beautifully that they can be. We want, you know, stunning motifs to be printed and to be woven, and we need really great drawers as well. So I would say the difference, the challenge for students to understand whether they are both art, or whether they are either art or design, is whether they want to have this design journey that is focused on a particular application or a particular customer profile or a particular market level or product. And I think that's a really different sort of ask for compared with, say, fine art, that may well be very much sort of self-driven through their concept development and personal investigation. But the design processes are really varied. Some people love kind of diving into practical research and sort of end up in the workshop start off. Some people lose themselves in trend research. And we try and encourage them through different project structures to sort of really interrogate their own preferred design process. Again, you can see the words on the screen there. We focus our projects to have different problem solving sort of opportunities. I also try and make sure that we work with industry to set really interesting live briefs. So the Mirrors, they are actually an aircraft seating manufacturer based in Hingham, would you believe? And we had a site visit there, we had a live project, and our third years last year were having to produce proposals for upholstery for the Middle Eastern market for aircraft. And that was a really interesting sort of element for them, for their portfolio, because it makes them competitive. It's not just a traditional fashion or interiors project. They have to think about, you know, somebody sitting in that seat for a long time. How does a row of seats look compared with just one seat in a living room, for example? And it gives them a really good opportunity to also respond to an industry sort of presentation, and having an external client to respond to as well. So we spent a lot of time thinking about trends and ethical design, and all in relation to knit, print, weave and stitch too. And some of our students collaborate with other students across NUA, because obviously we're all makers, we're all creatives, and so we understand how our skills link with other people. So I've mentioned context and thinking about sort of fashion and interiors as being the real sort of typical ones, I suppose. And I would also say over my last sort of, I don't know, 10, 15 years of interviewing for textile design, and for the last couple of years of interviewing for both fashion and for textile design, I would say there's a lot of misperceptions about a student helping, or a student trying to decide for themselves whether they want to study fashion or textile design. And I think, again, the conversations that we certainly have with students is, are they wanting to actually design, say, the silhouette, the sort of construction of a garment, or is it very much about the surface of that garment, and it's the actual fabric, the cloth? Because within textile design, we don't make garments and we don't make products necessarily. I mean, if we're knitting, we may well make a garment shape, but we don't certainly teach the garment construction. In fashion, they're not necessarily weaving the cloth or knitting the cloth, although sometimes they are, but they're not taught about, for example, things like pattern repeat in the same way that they're taught things like you know, pattern cutting and sort of garment construction. So they are technically, there are very different sort of elements on both those courses. Now, it's only natural that we've got students interested in both, but it's trying to work out the sort of the kind of the real focus, the skill set that they want to grow. So I'm happy to answer any other questions about that particularly. But I've put and then some, because this is the kind of real point I want to make, is how broad textile design can be. And our students respond to projects on all of these different elements that I've put as the bullet points. And technical textiles, you know, textiles with woven electronic circuits in them, dyes that respond to different heat or touch and respond in different ways. We've got, for example, sports, sort of real technical textiles alongside textiles for well-being. So, for example, bibs for people with dementia, or toys for children with autism or Asperger's. So really, really different design challenges that our students are engaging in. And I think that's incredibly exciting. And generally, when we give the sort of lecture, the first lecture to first years about kind of how broad our approach is for textile design, they're just blown away and they sort of sit in silence. You say, any questions? And they're sort of going, wow, don't know what to do with that information. And then gradually they sort of evolve their own sort of understanding and sort of find their niche through lots of discussions over the 3 years. So I spent a lot of time talking about textile design thinking because as I've said, I'm trying to make this shift of our graduates to not just see themselves as practical makers of textile design, but to see the control of the design process as absolutely paramount to them as employable graduates, to make sure that they've got this industry thinking. So you can see the bullet points there. There's some repetition in terms of the design element on the previous slide, but it's really important that our students understand, for example, customer profiling and market levels. It's about understanding that you've got the quality of the cloth, you've got the right yarn, you're understanding sort of maybe the kind of particular sort of references in terms of designing for, a John Lewis customer compared with, say, a Stella McCartney customer. So really understanding the kind of nuances of those things. And also making sure that those students can go out into industry and actually work with manufacturers when they are graduates, if they're setting up brands, for example. So these components are built into all of our different design projects, not one project with all of these, but through the 3 years, we sort of absolutely embed this understanding for them, because it makes them really, really sort of employable and gives them confidence that they are far more than somebody who can screen print or somebody that might be able to knit. And I think that's also showing them that the sort of diversity of their practical skills will carry them through the sort of design sort of opportunities that come too. I would also say with textile design students, textile design graduates have really significant transferable skills for industry. And I think sometimes textile design students they're far shyer than a fashion student in terms of they might need a little bit of a push. They might not be the first one to put their hand up. If you've got a textile and a fashion student is far more likely to say, yes, I'll do it. But what I would say about textile design students is that they are incredibly supportive of team working. I think they're really happy in a community. They will absolutely sort of work within a team collaboratively and develop really good communication skills. I've put their visual, verbal, and written, but their communication skills are really supportive within a broader team. And I think because we work with both hard and soft materials, we're very much used to working with manufacturers and clients too. That's sort of a really, really valuable asset for our graduates. So thinking about what is textiles, I'm sort of hoping that you've understood a little bit about the kind of the process of creating a textile designer, or somebody who at least sort of understands the breadth of the discipline. I've put these down as industry sectors. I've created that. I haven't taken it out of a book or a website, so apologies if I've missed one that's absolutely vital for you. But I'm hoping it fits most of the different kind of areas that our students touch on within the degree course. We've got so cute circuit down bottom right is the dress with the electronics in it, and this is about performance wear. And so we've got sort of really new technology, new applications, in contrast to, for example, the National Trust Textile Conservation Studio. And we have graduates in a whole range of these different sort of sectors. So we have graduate working in conservation, we have graduates working within sort of textile innovation. So Alice Potts is actually from fashion background from NUA, but worked closely with textile design and then went on to Royal College. And she's growing sort of fabrics through a kind of lab-based sort of growing fabrics from sweat and things like that. So really important research into the sustainable future of textile design. But we've also got students who want to go into more kind of sort of the mainstream. So we've got graduates working in Next Design Studio and Jules, for example. And then we have students, graduates in manufacturing. So, for example, IVOS, which is a commercial print setup, and that's fantastic. You can see them screen printing, huge fabrics for lengths of fabrics for people like St Jude's, for example, and many more interior fabric companies. So a textile design student also might be interested in, for example, assistant buying is a really good graduate trainee sort of journey through that. So they would apply for graduate traineeship and sort of go down that line as well. So we've got people who love research, wanting to go into trends, they're wanting to maybe be commentators about design rather than actually be designing themselves. Styling is something that lots of people are really interested in. And I think it's important for the students to understand that textile design, these roles really mix and match. And so you might do something, but never in isolation. So you might well be designing a collection to launch, but then you're working with a buyer. So to have the empathy of those different roles right the way through 3 years with us gives them the confidence that they know how it works and sort of where to go. This is probably the most boring slide visually, but I'm not going to read through it, but it's just for you to scan your eyes over, really. These are some of the industry opportunities that a graduate from textile design can go off and do, and some of those would require postgraduate training, but our students regularly go into these sorts of roles in terms of work placement as well as employment. And I think it just demonstrates how broad those transferable skills are as well. I think that's absolutely key. So I will leave it on there for you to have a little look at. So visual merchandiser, for example, this idea that actually you really like to style, they might be fantastic at putting their design boards together and really making a beautiful portfolio. They've got a really good understanding of colour, of layout, of communication. And they could work in, say, head office at John Lewis, where they're putting together in-store sort of visual displays and communicating that out to the regions, for example. I'm trying to think what else. A charity worker, so maybe using sort of skills for education roles within charity, or you could be doing something like VSO further down the line. We have a lot of students, it probably won't surprise you, who study textile design who want to actually go back into education. So they haven't all been put off by you and me, which is fantastic. And I think that idea of sharing their interest in this subject is a really nice, really nice thing to be able to sort of encourage them to do. So that's kind of me wrapped up. I know I'm aware I speak very, very fast. I'm just wanting to flag up, we have an NUA Textile Design Instagram account that really gives you an insight into what we're up to. We also share sort of industry opportunities and sort of highlights which might be of use to you. And we've also got the NUA Graduate Showcase, which is the degree show, the digital degree show that we put on last year. And I've got you the link there. I don't know if Olivia could put it in the chat, but it's you can then look at all the individual work that the graduates from last year have produced as well. And I shall end just on the idea of saying # we all wear pants, because I feel it is something that we have to keep on shouting about. Textile design is not a niche subject. It's a vastly underrated, but should be sort of celebrated material and design area. And I'm delighted that you're joining me, and I hope that's given you some food for thought. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Kate. If we've got any questions, we can either pop them into the chat or you can put your virtual hands up. I would like to start off by asking a question, if I may. You talked about drawing being really, really important. And we all know, whether we're artists on here or in the design technology sector, as some of my colleagues are, that drawing is really important. But when you get students coming to you from A level and from school, what skills do they lack when you start your course? Because that's something I think that we can think about when we're developing our curriculums and when we're teaching. And I always go back to my kind of practice of when I went to university. What did I lack? What can we give to the students to make sure that they can access your course in particular, and make it easier for them?
Okay, I would say in terms of drawing, actually a lot of the worry when we first start drawing in the studio together is whether they're going to get it right. They come with a preconception of what a drawing should look like. And I think that's the thing that holds them back. So it may not be the physical skill of drawing, but am I going to draw it better than anybody else? Mine's going to be dreadful. I can't draw it as it should look. And even last week I was saying to a group of students, there's not one way to draw, and we have to kind of we have to give ourselves permission to work out what our relationship with drawing is. And so I would urge anyone who, I mean, I understand the school curriculum is a very, very different beast to the curriculum that we can shape at degree level. And so I'm really aware that, I mean, I've got one of my children is high school level. And I'm afraid I just wince when, you know, she's told she's got to copy something, and I'm going, I'm spending 3 years telling people not to copy because it's plagiarism and you'd get done for intellectual property. So, you know, actually, I sort of get cross with kind of this idea that it has to look like something because that's what we've been told to look at and draw and almost regurgitate, recite. So I'm sorry, I have lots of soapbox moments, apologies, but I'm very passionate about it. So in terms of, so what I would say, if in any shape or form within the curriculum that you're having to work to, if you can give them permission to find lots of different ways to draw, that confidence will really show through. So I'm showing them a range of different people's drawing, and I show them sometimes people that are really, really different. So people like Egon Schiele. Now, okay, so there's some fairly extreme nudes that you may not want to show, but his landscapes are stunning. And people like Charles Rennie Mackintosh, you know, the architect, but the most beautiful watercolors of florals. And these are observed objects and things in front of them, but they are not like a camera would present. And I think that's the important thing. You know, I so often say, think about the weight of the line, you know, just no biros, no fine fiber tips, you know, a pencil, and give it the weight. Think about what that line is saying. And we do the left hand, we do the right hand, we do the continuous drawing, and some of them have done that before in school, and that's fantastic. And some of them are like, what the hell are you asking me to do this for? But I think we try and give permission to experiment. And Matisse would say, I draw with scissors. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of him with these vast scissors, but you know, we do that because that might make sense to some person. And we do drawing with needle and thread, or just punching a pin through the paper. All of those things, if in any way they can be validated by you guys as a really important way forward, it will build their permission themselves. I think we try and sometimes say, actually I'm going slightly off piste, Heather, but you can bring me back. We sometimes say, in terms of the sketchbooks, they sort of say, you know, they want to write everything they've ever done on this page. You know, I've used oil pastel and I've done this, and we're sort of going, okay, stop with the annotations. It's like, you had to do that in school, but in industry, nobody will read your annotations. So we are this transition between what school has asked of you and what industry will need of you. So also, we're not going to read your annotations because we're going to look visually at your design development. So that first term is a real challenge, and we hold them with kid gloves, but it's really about helping them to understand why they were asked to do something previously, and not to undermine what you guys are doing, but saying, but now we want something different and we're going to work with you on that. So we very often have to say, don't forget all the stuff that worked for you in school or in college. Bring that with you. It's not a kind of starting a clean slate. All the things that worked, bring them, and we're just going to start filling the bag with other stuff as well. And it's I think it goes back to confidence. I just try and validate every feeling they have. Yes, we're scared. I have bad drawing days. You know, the idea that they have to share with us everything they've put in a sketchbook. I mean, I've been in this career a long time and I still have bad sketchbook days. So, you know, it's keeping it real for them, really, and helping them to want to take a risk and not fear taking a risk.
That's great. What's really interesting for me, coming from secondary to primary, and I'm sure my primary colleagues on here will say the same, is how even at 5 years old, they have an idea of how they're meant to draw.
Yeah.
And it's crazy for me that when I'm teaching them, I'm just saying, no, where have you got this from already? You know, you have to just, you know, remove all of that and just be fluid and enjoy it, and not be consciously thinking about it, I think.
Yeah,
And so
and I think sorry, Heather, I think that's why, you know, they sort of, I think we all make a comment to a student to support them with the best will in the world, and they hear something entirely different. So, you know, I was told that I was lazy because when I was at art school, because I'd produced something that was quite minimal. Now, I would argue it's actually quite difficult to make something beautiful and minimal, and that the things that are on the page have to be far stronger for it, because they can't be lost in the chaos of everything else. And he just thought I was being lazy. I was so offended by that. And I was like, no, you've just misunderstood me. And I think it's about trying to understand, or let them understand that, you know, hearing that, oh, you draw really well, so you're probably best off fine art, you know, and then we're thinking, don't we want really beautifully drawn children's books? Don't we want really beautiful wallpaper? Don't we want? So I think it's just helping them to see that those drawings are really the starting point for so many other things.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, Amy, you had your hand up. Amy Lee, if you'd like to come in, take your microphone off and ask Kate a question.
First of all, can I join your course, please? Secondly, I just wanted to add, with the drawing skills, the more experimentation, the better for us as well as secondary teachers. Okay. So drawing with different media, really just to discuss this with the primary teachers, drawing with a marker pen and drawing with a pencil both have their merit.
Yeah.
And we have had exceptional draftsmen in terms of drawing, and also much weaker students who, once you put their work into pattern work, it's actually the person without the strongest drawing, if you like, that produces the best pattern. So I just wanted to flag it as something that we're conscious of, and for primary colleagues joining, just because it doesn't look like what it's supposed to can still be translated into something really exceptional.
Yeah,
so, yeah, it's wonderful.
And that's why, by showing people, you know, drawing like by Picasso or Matisse, gives them that permission, I think. Although I have had to say to the third years this term, because when we're talking about their drawing approaches and their sort of visual language for the portfolio, a lot of them are saying, oh, well, I'm sort of doing a bit mark making, and I'm sort of going, okay, we've now got a year group of mark makers, which actually, when we take our students to, for example, to New Designers, which is the sort of trade show for graduates, I've often been taken to one side when, you know, they're showing a portfolio, they're really keen on a particular student, and then the design team from, I don't know, Jules or Hallmark Cards or whatever will come to me and they say, but can she draw? And actually what they mean by that is, can they draw a rose and it looks like a beautiful rose? Mm-hmm. So I think there is this balance. I think the students sometimes think there's some quick wins by a bit of mark making and continuous lines. And actually, if you draw something for 2 hours, you've got a very different thing. And it's a bit of both. I mean, I try and teach drawing by saying, you know, I think of it as kind of getting to know somebody. So you're not going to sit down and ask them the most personal question first off. You're going to be asking kind of, where do you live? Or, you know, cliche, do you come here often? So you're sort of starting with a big bold question, but sort of obvious questions, I suppose, less sort of invasive. And then as you draw, as you get to know the object, as well as you get to know the person in the conversation, you can find out more, you can interrogate a little bit more. So by spending time making lots of drawings, you're getting to know more and more and more, and then have more confidence to own that drawing. And I think sometimes they think, I'm going to draw it once and it's going to be amazing. And I think when you can see that they've done a drawing and they've done the same thing again and again and again and again, they can then see the merit. But committing them to spend 2 hours, they might go, but it took ages. It's like, yes, but isn't it worth it? Now you can charge a few £100 for it. So it's a bit of a mix, actually. But yeah, I mean, you're completely right, Amy. It's sort of a long process right through the school journey to get that right.
And my other question is, do you get many boys on your course? And how do you interest boys to textiles when it is such a fundamental thing in our lives? It's typically seen as a female pursuit. So just wondering how we encourage our male students in your direction.
So I was actually going to take a photograph of it, but I decided it didn't look so good, so I wasn't. But I was going to show you what I made in high school as my first textile product. I'm a complete womble. I hoard everything. And it's a tidy. So it's got a bit of dowel, and it's got a bit of, I did something with the handle, and then we made pockets, and we had to sew buttons on it. We had a bit of rick-rack and all of that. And it was in the 80s, so, you know, imagine it. And then my daughter was saying, oh, we've got to make tidies in high school textiles. I'm like, oh my God, like that's why you're not getting boys. So if there is any scope, I would say, imagine designing a trainer. Imagine it could be knitted, it could be woven, it could be printed surface design. You've got the graphics on the box, you've got technology in there, you've got 3D printing, you can laser cut something. Now that might seem slightly more interesting than a domestic tidy. And again, it goes down to, you guys know your curriculums and what wiggle room you've got. But this is why I've offered to talk through textile design with you guys, because we have to get rid of this domestic craft tag, because we are a huge global industry with so much excitement. And yeah, I'm going to be saying it till I'm in a box.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
It doesn't have to be trainers. It could be something else, but just not a domestic tidy that hangs in a bedroom.
We've been really naughty at our school, and we spray mount fabric onto A4 paper, and you can fit it through the photocopier or the printer, and that's got a lot more of our boys interested, because they can see that you can go bigger or turn it into something. So it's part of a process.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll stop. I know there's other people that want to ask questions.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Lovely. I think we're going to come over to Rachel from Jane Austen College.
Hi, Kate. Thank you
Hello.
for that. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
So many career options as well that I had no idea about. So that was really, really fascinating. I have a question about potential applicants to your course. Because we've got a sixth form at Jane Austen, and quite a few students do ask us about textiles. And I was wondering, what sort of things do you like to see in a portfolio of a prospective student? You mentioned drawing quite a lot. Is that something that you like to prioritise?
I wave a big flag for drawing, but I think take away from it, I'm meaning drawing in the broadest of senses. So I would think of it as visual language. I want to see image making. I'm wanting to see how somebody sees the world around them. And I would even include taking photographs within that sort of visual language element of the portfolio. There's many different sorts of textile design students. So there's going to be people like me that is very image based, that's about a flat pattern applied to a surface. But there's also makers in terms of three-dimensional form, and people who want to play with that materiality. So it could be about knit and weave, but it could be about crochet or macrame, or even the kind of messiness of kind of wet sort of processes and plaster. And if I would try and give permission to those. So if materiality could come into a portfolio, that would be really useful. And thinking about the traditions, the hard and soft materials as well, to think about surface design as well as knit and weave. We certainly, I'm always saying at Open Day, we don't expect anyone to have had tried or had an opportunity to study textile design before coming to us, because we teach it right from scratch. But I think it gives the student a bit of reassurance that if they've tried it, they kind of know what they might be letting themselves in for. So the making side of things, I think, is really good. I've seen fantastic portfolios where they are designing for a particular person or a particular client. I would say, and I think because we take people who've studied graphics, so we do see some people have put imagery in repeat and some people haven't done. I've just spent an hour and a half talking to third year textile design students about pattern design, and I do wince at the notion of having a motif repeated lots of times, because you can tile that on a photocopier and you can do that in Photoshop. A monkey could do that. So in a way, I would undo probably most pattern teaching that's gone before in order to really build up degree level pattern making. But I think, as Amy said, I completely understand that this idea of a multiple image is so seductive to pattern makers, that if that's the thing that makes them tick, then please include it. Because for me, that's what made it, where I started cutting lino in my A levels, and suddenly I was like, oh my God, look, I'm repeating huge surfaces. I'm a pattern maker. And I spent a long time designing socks and everything else with repeating patterns. So I think try and allow some of the very broad subjects, the broad kind of issues. So colour work, I think, is something that's really exciting for people. Photography, materials. We want to see that they're interested in the world around them. So in a way, that's giving them permission that what they want to do might make sense. So think about, they don't need to list contemporary designers, but I think thinking about kind of where maybe who they might be inspired by would work. But you guys have got such a full curriculum, you can't fit everything in, but I hope that's a bit of a clue.
That's really good. Thank you. And thank you, Olivia, for putting that link in the chat. That's helpful. Brilliant.
Oh, yeah, there's a recorded Open Day PowerPoint. Is that what she's done? I don't know.
It's your wonderful film, Kate, where you're talking.
Oh goodness! Oh dear! Yeah,
I'm just encouraging people to circulate you round to their students.
Oh dear! Yeah, I'm not born for TV. Sorry.
That's great, thank you. Are there any more questions from any of our people online today that I've missed? Feel free to put your virtual hands up, or just come in and join in if you have any more questions.
Yeah, I'd like to just, I know I've been given the floor, so I can, but just while you're thinking of other questions, I think this is really important to be able to have that two-way dialogue, because I think otherwise the only way that we benefit from your work is the students that come to us, and there we don't have a conversation with you, so we can never turn around and go, that portfolio was amazing coming from that school. I know we have some schools that follow us on Instagram, and you sort of, and when we get reposted, you think, great, there's dialogue, there's something going on there. But I think it's, you know, I'm really happy to have conversations later, because, you know, further down the line, whatever, because I think the more we can help students understand the scope of opportunities, it's, you know, I just don't understand why textile design is this kind of mispackaged or misunderstood. But the parents kind of look at me in horror, like, how can you think you want this student to do that? and it's such an exciting career. And I think, you know, because we've got fashion, we've got interiors, we've got architects, we've got, you know, journalism and all the rest of it as well. I think it's the right person can find the right niche. They don't all want to be brand owners, and well, there's some do. I give you a warning, there's quite a few people who want to set up natural dye companies in Norfolk at this time, so so be ready for them.
I think, Kate, what Nura and Nico and all of you do for our pupils is, you know, when we can have sessions like this, you can inspire us. We can take that back into the classroom, but also when we have those practitioners that come into school. I can remember when I was in Thetford, I've forgotten the lady's name, Northern Irish lady who came in, and she was doing like stitch illustration. And then it just absolutely crescendoed into this passion for 6 or 7 of our pupils. And that particular year, 2 of them went off in some kind of textile design or fashion, or it was just the most inspiring moment for them.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. And I just think that anything that you can bring to our trust is just going to really, you know, fire our imagination and inspiration, and also theirs as well. So thank you from all of us.
I think just think about, rather, because we don't make the cushions, although some will make a cushion, but because we don't make the cushion, we make the cloth for the cushion. I think it's about helping them to think how broadly that could be. And I think it's we have students who have a very narrow life experience, and, you know, and they'll buy something from B&Q or Next Home, and that's their place. And then we've got other people who are much more internationally read, and they'll look at, you know, Instagram and look at brands all over, and look at maybe trade shows. We try and encourage a lot of trade show directories, you know, for them to look at that, because they can see designers from across the world as well. So I think that's really important. But I would say, don't feel that you have to know all this stuff, but try and point them in a direction that is broad, that's, you know, that is showing them different applications. So, you know, a Stella McCartney trainer and a bio textile that's being grown out of mushrooms is, you know, they're mind blowing, and that's not a cushion from B&Q. So that's kind of what I would ask. And yeah, that's it.
Can I just say thank you to Abby? It was Nikita Morgan. That was the brain melt after a long day on the internet. I also think what's really, really interesting is that crossover between our design technology departments as well. And I know we've got Liz Tozer on here, and you manage Nicola over at East Point, and she's a 50-50. She's a techie girl and art as well. And I think that sometimes in secondaries we're so separate, the curriculum areas, not just in location, but there is so much crossover as well that we can do. And I think the more work that we can do with our technology leads as well, and just to work on cross-curricular maybe ideas, things like that, could really support especially our Key Stage 3 students as well.
I think that's kind of what I mean with the design journey. So you instill this sense of you're gathering visual language, you're understanding what it might want to be looking like as a starting point, but you're not deciding what the end design will be. This is your starting point ingredients. And I always say that it's a bit like cooking. If you start with really fantastic ingredients, whatever you do with it, the dinner's generally going to be great. If you start with just a pepper, your tea's going to be a bit disappointing. So that's why you need more motifs, interesting and well-drawn stuff. But if you understand where that journey is going to take you, the stages of it, it is about sourcing of the right material or the right process. It's about understanding who is it for and what has it got to do. Is it a decorative item? Is it a utilitarian, functional item, for example? In which case, because of that item, if it's like a school bag, there are certain things that has to be able to achieve. So all of that questioning is part of your design journey. And then you're thinking, okay, so it's a school bag. So which sort of school? What sort of, has it got to be a satchel? Has it got to be a, trainer's bag, whatever? And then you're getting under price points and, a kind of an understanding of your client. So I think for me, I don't know whether that helps, but by the textile design sort of course, sort of the practical kind of craft side of things compared to the design technology, I wonder whether there's more synergy in that thinking rather than it being about the process of making. And I think that's where I was trying to say that make concern of mine is I do textiles because I sew, is maybe limiting people.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also interested about new designers. You take your students there annually. It's an amazing experience as a student. I did new designers and I made a bit of money when I was there and it was fantastic. And I've tried to encourage A-level students that I've taught as well to go down there. What do your students feel about it when they go down at the end of their third year? What's their kind of impression?
They're mainly so daunted on that first day because they've been living in a bubble of however many students, and then suddenly they realise that there's all these other people that also want the same job as them or are in competition with them, and they'll often go round and say, oh, I've seen her on Instagram, or so there's almost a community formed ahead of the show, and they sort of say, oh, I saw that coming up, or new designers featured that, whatever. But they realise, we do say it before, but obviously they only believe it when they see it, how competitive it is. But also that I think what's difficult for them, and also the first trade show that I did showing my work, you kind of want everybody to look at your work and stand there and give it time and go, oh my goodness, that's amazing. But actually you realise that the industry know exactly what they're looking for. So, somebody from, say, the Bath team in John Lewis who are looking for, designs for towels and really not going to be looking at your, stationery line. It's a different thing. So I think it's trying to help them to understand that actually you might know what your work's about, but they know what they're looking for. And it's quite harsh reality in that sense. But we do a lot of, it's so sad to be where we're at this moment, but I would normally do, I do graduation handshake practice with them all because I think it was Amy that commented it was all female. For me, to see students walk across the stage to graduate, so often the women, the female students have their heads down, almost sort of apologising, going across the stage, sort of trying to get the moment over, this moment that they've waited for 3 years with their cap and gown. And then they go again, and then that moment's done. It's a bit like sort of walking down the aisle at your wedding. You kind of want it to last a little bit. And I try and make them, we do this practice, and they find it really awkward and embarrassing, and why is Kate asking me to do this? But actually what that's about is putting your shoulders back, head up, knowing you've earned that moment to be there. And as a woman in the industry, you need to be able to think, I can look you in the eye and I deserve to be here, and I can give a good solid handshake. And for me, preparing them in that way is about taking them to new designers and say, I can do this. And the sale might not come, the opportunities might not come, but you've got hopefully a sense of confidence and understanding that you know how to pick up the telephone and secure a meeting in the future. We don't do that for them. I refuse to phone up and ask a job or a work placement for them, because I'll tell them what they've got to have a conversation with, but I hate picking up the phone too. And sometimes it just has to be done. So those life skills, I think, is really important. I teach my students, if they send me just an attachment to deal with, I send it back and say, I'd like a top and tail of an email, because that's what industry will expect. So we spend a huge amount of time on that side of things as well, to make them competitive.
That's great. Thank you, Kate. Any more final messages? Because I know that we've come to the end of our hour. I think
I'd just like to say thank you very much. It's been really, really interesting. I've actually really enjoyed the Q&A part of it all as well.
Thank you.
I actually did printed textiles design for my degree, and so it's brought back lots of lovely memories.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay, so I think everybody's virtual hands have gone down, so that's great. Thank you very much to our amazing art community here at Inspiration Trust, and thank you, Kate, for your wonderful wisdom over the last hour.
Thank you.
What's brilliant about the CPDs that we have here at the Trust is that it fills us with inspiration after a really challenging 3 or 4 weeks in our new role as virtual teachers, whether that be in school or at home in our offices or our studios or wherever we work. It's really good to be inspired at the end of a hard day and take that inspiration away so that we can pass that on to our students. So thank you for your time today, and thank you, Olivia, as well, for talking to us about all the fantastic opportunities for newer